Okay. Hello. Good morning. Welcome. Oh, I like that. That was nice. I'm excited to be hanging out with you all for the next 75-ish minutes. We're going to be talking about communication and all of the stuff that lives underneath that. Very grateful to be doing this session following Miss Erin Jones, right? I feel like this is a right. I feel like this is a really wonderful segue after her conversations of gratitude, brave spaces, the need to pause. So perfect tie-in. And yeah, let's do this. Let's have this conversation. So my name is Loretta Turner. I use she, her pronouns. Oh, I love that I get to describe myself. This is fun. So I have blonde box braids in. I'm giggling because on the next slide, there's another photo of me in which I don't have the braids. But right now, I have blonde box braids in. I'm a Black woman, 5'4". I'm wearing a white lace cover up with white pants and a pink shirt. And how would I describe my smile? It's definitely joyous. Joyous. I have a lot of levity to me. And I'm excited to be here. So, this is me. I'm the founder of Do Good Leadership Collective. We are not a nonprofit, but we operate like a nonprofit in a lot of ways. We have a mission that is all about helping social impact professionals do good and be well. Because very much like Erin was sharing, cannot pour from an empty cup. We know that social impact work for many of us is embedded in our DNA. It's like in our bones. And we'll keep going and going and going. If you want to keep going, if you really want to commit to resiliency, we also have to check in with our own well-being, our own wellness. And so our conversation about communication today is a way to advocate for our own needs, our own well-being, and then make sure that we're holding the right type of spaces, the right types of containers with others so that we're communicating really well and not operating in this place of reactivity. So again, I use she, her pronouns. I'm San Diego based, but very thrilled to be hanging out in Seattle with you all today. I always love to share that I'm an East Coast girly, originally from New Jersey. Yeah, where are my East Coast people at? Woo! Take a lot of pride in being from the East Coast. Like I said, founder of Do Good Leadership Collective. And I always lead all of my conversations. I lead all of my presentations with my values. And the reason I do that is because I need folks to know where I'm operating from and where my decision making is coming from. And that's a huge part of communication. And so what you need to know about me, especially if we're in disagreement or if times are tough, is that I'm going to make decisions that promote my own wellness and the wellness of my people. I am the type of person that will hold themselves accountable. You can hold me accountable and also know that I will hold you accountable. And community is so important to me. And I'm always thinking about the collective, the greater good, the bigger pot, so to speak, when I'm making decisions. So what I would love to do, I mean, if I had all the time in the world, I'd sit down with each of you one-on-one and get to know everything I can about you. But we don't have that time. We don't have that luxury today. So what I would love for you to do is introduce yourselves to somebody next to you, maybe 2 or 3 people next to you. And I also want you to lead with this question, right? Or answer this question in your small group. What does clear communication feel like to you? We're going to talk about feelings a bit today, right? Which is why, yeah, I saw a couple faces like, oh, am I in the right room? Yeah, we're going to talk about feelings a bit, but I want to start with this prompt of what does clear communication feel like? When you've clearly communicated with somebody or someone's clearly communicated with you, when you're like, okay, we're on the same page, what is the feeling? What is the physical and emotional sensation that comes up in your own body, your own mind? So let's take 3-4 minutes to do that with the folks around you. And then I might want to hear a little bit of what came up in your conversations. So go ahead. Alrighty, folks, let's bring it back to center. Bring it back to center. Bring it back to center. This was fun for me to just look around the room and see the way y'all are expressing feelings. I saw some big arms. So let's hear a couple of voices. How did we answer this prompt? What does clear communication feel like? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we were ready.
Tell us.
Monica, she verbalized it as exuberance.
Ooh.
When you connect with somebody and you're both on the same page, you both understand, and there's an exuberance to it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, no, that was it. I just get so hyped. Like, you're like...
I'm taking her that one.
Yeah.
Well, we also were kind of talking about how it's like a physical light bulb almost comes lights up the room.
Yeah,
for you. Like,
brightness.
Oh my gosh, look at us. We're here on the same plane. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I saw a hand back here. Yeah.
I feel grounded, peaceful, and I can breathe like fully, like my body.
Yeah. Let's get one more question, and then I have a question for y'all.
Oh, I was just gonna say like a sense of relief.
Yeah.
Like we sort of have a lot of
Yeah.
fear around being misunderstood, so we kind of counteract that by like over articulating or saying, "Does that make sense?" You know. And so when we feel like we are making sense, then it's like a okay.
Yeah, like that easefulness.
Yeah.
Dare I ask what not clear communication feels like? Stress, frustration, anxiety, not good, no bueno. Embarrassment, shame. Yeah, okay. So do you see where we're going with the feelings piece here? Yeah, okay. So to really address reactive communication, which is what we're talking about, right? How do we break these patterns of reactive communication and these unhelpful patterns of communicating? We have to start with emotional reactivity and also understand where we're trying to get goal-wise. So the reason I picked this name, Clear as Kind, is because from my girl, Brene Brown. Any Brene Brown fans in here? Yeah, she's amazing. So she coined this term, or really this phrase, clear is kind, unclear is unkind, in her book, Dare to Lead. It's fantastic. If you've already read it, I would read it again. And she carves out these 4 important points around why we need to be kind in our communication, why we need to be really clear in our communication. So the first thing she emphasizes is that we are living in a complex and rapidly changing world. Sound about right? And in the work that we do, it absolutely impacts our work environment. We are always looking outwards at the mess that is our society and then figuring out internally, how do we respond, or really, how are we reacting, okay? The second thing she noted is because we're working in this complexity, we need braver leaders and more courageous cultures. What gets in the way of that courage and that bravery is avoiding tough conversations and not being really honest and not being really clear about what needs to be said, okay? So again, bringing it back to emotions in a moment, what we're gonna do today is understand where our own reactive thinking and behaviors come from, because we're all guilty of it. We're going to identify the types of work cultures that foster reactive communication. We're going to discuss how we can break up those patterns and how to move towards more compassionate and proactive communication styles. And what I want to emphasize is that this is just not with our colleagues. This is with donors. This is with funders, because I'm sure we've got some reactive communication tendencies with the folks that we've got our hands out for, like trying to get the dollar from, right? So we've got to look at those relationships as well. And then hopefully by the end of our conversation, we might have a little more insight on how we can experience that clarity feeling that you all just discussed, that softness, that ease, that exuberance, right? How do we get there at work? How do we get there in this very fast-paced, complex environment and culture that we're working in? So, like I said, emotional reactivity is the first place that we have to go if we really want to understand clear communication. So, anyone know these folks? Yeah, I love them. I'm seeing them on Sunday for their second movie. Very, very excited. So let's go ahead and let them tell us about emotional reactivity after this commercial. 3, 2, Happy New Year. Oh, Colorado. And there's another. Okay, so can we hear this? We can't hear it. Sorry? Oh, shucks. Oh, yeah, let's do that. We'll only play a couple of seconds of it. Not available. Okay. So, you know what? Maybe I'll do a little dub over. So we know this chick, right? This is her happy emotion, right? And we can see the behaviors that are coming as a result of maybe listening to some fun music, being in a good mood, right? This is what's happening in our head, this emotion of happiness, of joy. And now we can see the opposite, right? She's doing some writing, she's relaxing. Oh no, milk. Oh, 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 oh. Yeah, so it starts in the brain, but then we see it happening outside of our bodies, right? The way that we are responding to our own emotions. Okay, this one's probably my favorite. Yeah, yeah. And then there's the behavior, right? Right. Okay, so we get the point, right? We get the connection between our emotions and how we can react on the outside of the conversation that's happening in our own head. And so, what is this, right? What is emotional reactivity? Not a scientist, but very simply, it's an emotional response to a situation or some type of stimuli, right? Something happens in our environment. Somebody says something to us. We get that email at 4:55, or we realize that the deadline for that grant is tomorrow and not the day after, right? There is something that happens, and our emotions are like, ding, ding, ding. We've got to address this. What's important to note is that we all have different thresholds for emotional reactivity, right? The way I respond to one stimuli is going to look different from one person to the next. And it also has different levels of intensity, right? My emotional reaction to some things, like football, right? Super intense. And for other people, it might not be as intense. That also means that our emotions, when they manifest as behaviors, can look different from one person to the next. And what I want to emphasize here is that behaviors that come as a result of our emotional reactivity can be positive or negative, right? They can showcase in positive or negative ways, and they're usually impulsive when we're thinking about emotional reactivity. So I want to emphasize that behaviors and the way we can communicate can be good or bad. But the emotion that we're feeling is not necessarily bad. I'm a believer that there's no such thing as bad feelings. There's no such thing as bad emotions. And I love this tool. I share it with folks all the time. It's hanging up in my kitchen. Every day I go to it with my cup of coffee and I just get honest. Where am I at? What am I feeling? Am I in a place of anxiety? Am I feeling shameful about something? Am I jealous of somebody? Nothing wrong with being honest about those feelings. Nothing wrong with getting the email and saying internally, I feel that way. Or nothing wrong with knowing that you're going to a meeting with a funder and having to say to yourself, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit inferior, right? Those emotions are okay. Where it gets sticky is when we don't look at the cycle of the behaviors that result as those emotions come up, and also when we don't address the way we're communicating because of the emotions that are coming up. And so I'm going to ask the group here, what strong emotions emerge for you at work? What types of interactions trigger those emotions? And feel free to just raise your hand, share with the group. Fear, okay. Let's hear more. Ooh, yeah. Fear, insecurity, anxiety, frustration. What would say it again? Irritation. Yeah. Pride. Okay. Pride, joy, excitement. Yeah, the whole spectrum, right? Can we think about too some of the interactions that are attached to those emotions that you feel? I just gave some examples. The 4:55 email, the oh my God, I can't believe I have to talk to this funder. I don't think they like me, right? What else? Ooh, yeah, feedback sessions, performance evaluations.
An hour on a spreadsheet that doesn't say correctly.
Yes, let's give that one some snaps. Yeah, yeah, technology. What else?
Grant denial.
One more time.
Grant denials.
Grant denials. Oh, I get furious. I'm like the little red guy, like the hair's on fire. What do you mean you're not funding us? You said something else here.
Oh my gosh, I forgot.
Oh goodness, I heard it.
I said something about
Lack of direction. Yeah, no clarity. Wink, wink. That's what we're talking about today. No autonomy, lack of autonomy. Yep. Micromanaging. Yeah. Yeah. And the reason I'm having us all share out is because I want us to remember that we're not alone in having these thoughts in our head and recognizing, yeah, we get activated at work. Work can really push our buttons. And so what you all just emphasize is we have workplace communication triggers. Yay. Okay. And what you're probably thinking as you're reading what's on the screen here is about all the people who do this to you, right? Right? It's everyone's fault. Oh my God, so many people are unresponsive. I always have misunderstandings with that person. I can't stand the way this person criticizes me. That person's a micromanager. That person doesn't recognize me. You know, this person doesn't listen. Very easy to look outwards and recognize the way other people trigger us. But what I want to emphasize here is that we also do this. No, me? Come on. Cute hair. How could I do this, right? But honestly, this is the conversation I want to have today, that this clear communication goes both ways. And oftentimes we don't know that we're doing this. We don't know that we're communicating this way. This often lives in our blind spot. Any questions so far? Making sense? Feeling like you're looking in the mirror right now, like, oh no. Okay? But here's the thing. Because we can see outwardly and know that other people trigger us, other people have communication styles that get us going, again, we have to admit that we are also those people. We do this to other people. Oops. So let's talk about the environment in which this stuff happens. Workplace cultures that have a lot of what's going on the screen are going to intensify those communication triggers. And I know as fundraising professionals, this probably looks really, really familiar. Something I didn't mention at the top of my talk here is that I'm a former in-house grant writer, and then by accident / was voluntold to become director of development, right? So I get that the environments we work in very, very, very much look like this. For reasons, I'm not going to get on this soapbox about the nonprofit industrial complex. I'm not going to go there. But we work in environments that really foster and fester this stuff, right? Where are my grant writers in here? Whew. The deadlines, right? That deadline pressure is just unbelievable. And then the heavy workload, right? Especially when we think about the seasons that we go in as fundraisers. Someone said in the opening plenary about, January being that month that's just like, oh my God, like it's just too much. Unrealistic or unclear goals. We are working so quickly, working with different teams, right? Trying to communicate to one party and another party what we do, but maybe that changed, right? That can put a lot of stress in the way we communicate. Anyone been in an organization where there's a new process, new CRM? Yeah, that's a pressure cooker I don't like to be in, right? Tough, super tough. And yeah, nonprofits, dwindling resources. You got to do more with less, y'all. It's putting so much pressure on these communication triggers. So then what ultimately happens is we're in these pressure cookers. And let me say this, a pressure cooker is not a terrible place to be, right? A pressure cooker can facilitate a lot of change. It's a wonderful catalyst for change. But if we're not really managing that pressure cooker well, we're going to overcook. We're going to get too hot. And when we get too hot, that's when these less than ideal behaviors come up, right? This poor reactive communication emerges. And what I want to emphasize here is when we think about poor communication, when we think about reactive communication, you might be thinking about an outburst, right? And maybe you have colleagues, or maybe you're that person, it's me, that is an outburst type of person, right? Like I just kind of blow up, or I get real New Jersey with you, right? Like I'll snap back. But reactive communication isn't always big or loud. Reactive communication is avoidance. Reactive communication is procrastination. It is passive aggressiveness, not saying what needs to be said. It's feeling the pressure to say yes. Like, okay, yeah, whatever, I'll just do it. I have absolutely no capacity and I really wanted to take that vacation, but I will just do it, okay? That's reactive communication. It also leads to feelings of inadequacy. This is where work-life boundaries gets blurred because of unclear reactive communication. And it can also lead to very unhealthy conflict. Okay. And then it looks like this. It becomes this pattern. And again, like I said, reactive communication isn't always a big outburst, right? It doesn't always have to be this like pouty McPout-pout face. But it does become this cycle of, well, this is just how we operate. This is just how we communicate. When I'm in this environment, when I feel this pressure, when these deadlines are coming and these emotions are coming up, I just get passive aggressive, or I just tap out, or I just become unresponsive. And then that impacts the people we work with. And then they have their own reactive communications, whatever it might be. And then it just keeps going and going and going. And I feel like a lot of us can relate to this cycle. We're in this intense workplace culture. And we have this individual stress, right? That has a lot to do with our own lived experience too, right? The things that we bring to the workplace and our own identities and the way that we just perceive and operate in the world, right? All of that's kind of pushing down on us. And then we have this emotional and behavioral reactivity, a lot of times subconscious, a lot of times we don't know that we're doing it. And then that creates conflict in communication. And then that leads to decreases in morale, decreases in productivity, again, issues with work-life balance, and then it just keeps going. So my question to you is, where do we break the pattern, right? If you could go in here and kick out one of these arrows, where would you kick it? Or where do you think you have to start? Okay, I want to hear more ideas, more opinions. Okay, what else? Okay. You really could start anywhere, hypothetically. But personally, and the way that I want to bring this work to you is that it starts with the self. It starts with looking in the mirror, because that's the work that you can control, right? We'll jump back to this for a second. Yeah, you can address communication conflicts. You can bring them up with folks. You can absolutely start having conversations about issues of morale and productivity. You can elevate to the powers that be that the work culture is not healthy, but nothing really changes unless you start with yourself, okay? So we're gonna go through a step-by-step process here to get an idea on how you can get clear with yourself first. And the first thing that you have to do is have the tough conversation by identifying your own stress and your own tendencies for emotional reactivity. Do I have anyone who's brave enough to share a little bit of what that looks like? To be able to raise your hand and be like, hello, my name is so-and-so, and then we'll all respond and say, hello, so-and-so. And then you'll share. This is what my stress looks like, and this is my tendency when I'm stressed. This is how I react emotionally. Yes.
So I used to.
Wait, you got to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Annie.
Hi, Annie. Yeah. Thank you. And I want you to know I see you, I hear you, and I am so grateful for your courageousness and your bravery, because this is how we make the change. Hearing the stories of like, oh yeah, this person is avoidant, not because they don't care about their work or because they're lazy, but because this is how they're coping with the stress of this environment. And it's important to hear the different styles of communication or reactive communication, because it's going to look different from one person to the next, right? You avoid, I lash out. It doesn't mean one person is better than the other, but then we have to figure out how do we communicate and avoid getting both of us to that place, right? Any more examples, stories, honesty about what this looks like for us? Don't forget your name.
Hi, I'm Jared.
Hi, Jared. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who shared. And I'm sure you all in your own mind have your own story. The next thing I want you to consider after hearing some of these stories is, do you have someone on your team, in your organization, that has behavior like that you've made a story up about? Has some of the behavior that we've heard, like, oh, I get really strong, I get really heated, or I start doing a lot, or I avoid, right? Do we all know someone on our teams that maybe acts that way? What stories do we make up? I hear some chuckles. So what do we think?
Can you explain the question a little more?
Sure. So I'll just keep using you as my avoidant example, because jumping back, the thing that gets me under my skin is, where is it? Unresponsiveness, right? Your name one more time? Yes. Annie. So if Annie and I are working together, and I don't know all the pressure that she's got on her, maybe I don't know it fully, right? And I don't know her background with gymnastics and pressure and perfectionism. And we're working together, and I know that she's been avoidant and she's not responding to my emails, or maybe we're collaborating on a project and every day I check the document, I'm like, I don't see no damn comments from Annie, right? I'm making up a story. She's lazy, she doesn't like me, she doesn't want to work here. Maybe I'm even going even deeper and I'm thinking about issues of identity. Oh, she doesn't like people like me, right? So that's an example of what our brains subconsciously do when we see folks that have behaviors that activate those triggers in us. So what I want to hear from folks is, what are the stories we make up?
That people don't care about their jobs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so you're hearing, like, at the water cooler, like, oh, so-and-so definitely doesn't care. Yeah, okay. What else? What else do we hear?
I always get really personal with it and assume that they don't like me.
Yeah.
It's my fault, I'm doing something wrong. And then it's easy to really go to that people.
Yep. Yep. Saw a hand here.
That I'm not respected or less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of internalization comes up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then what does that lead to with communication? Yeah, breakdowns. I don't want to help you anymore. I'm not interested in working with you. I can't be in a meeting with this person because I know they feel this way about me. Right? Do we see how there's so much like not unclarity here? When the simplicity of it was Annie is stressed, and this is how she's relating to her work, right? So this is why the self is important. It's having that conversation of like, yeah, this is the thing I do. I catch a big attitude. I get really annoyed. I say stuff under my breath, right? Just being honest about how you show up. So here's another visual that I love. Liz and Molly do some really wonderful, Liz Folson and Molly do some really wonderful infographics about emotion. So feel free to check them out. You've probably seen them all over social media. I've seen on Instagram and LinkedIn, they've got these really wonderful visuals. But one of the questions I like to ask myself and encourage folks to ask themselves is, how would I rate my system of self-management? So I'll say again, the feelings that you have, right? The stress, the anxiety, the joy, the fear, whatever it is, not an issue, right? The reaction is what needs to be going on in your head. Your reaction to the email, your reaction to the work, your reaction to the person doesn't define you. It's the response that does. And this little thin line in between is where self-management lives. And so this is what we mean by self-management. How are you regulating that little space in between, right? Aaron Jones talked about it, this idea of the pause. Am I pausing before I'm following up on that email? Am I pausing before I go into this meeting with this person that I think might feel a type of way about me? Am I pausing before getting on the phone with this funder or writing this piece? And pausing is something we can do, of course, in the moment. But when we think about emotional regulation and management and really getting that buffer in between the reaction and then the communication, we can also do some stuff behind the scenes when we're not at work, when we're not in that moment, that can help build the buffer like a stronger muscle. And these are just a few of my favorites, right? We've already done it. It's naming the emotion. And the reason I use the feeling wheel is because, and I'll jump back for a moment, if I tell myself, oh, I'm angry, oh, God, I'm so angry, but then I pause, I run to my kitchen, and I'm like, all right, what am I actually feeling? Oh, I'm not angry, I'm just agitated. Oh, I haven't eaten. Okay, right? Or if I notice that my breathing is getting really like, it's really picking up pace before this meeting. Oh my God, I'm so scared. I'm so freaked out. I'm having a panic attack. Oh, no, I'm not. I just feel kind of inadequate when I'm in this meeting with this person because they talk to me in ways that makes me feel that way, right? So the regulating that we have to do is really name the feeling, because the way we deal with certain feelings is going to look different from one to the next. And then validate the emotion. Like I said, the feeling isn't bad. Celebrate it. Okay, I'm irritated. Woo, right? Oh, okay, I feel inadequate in this room. I feel that's valid. That's okay to feel that way. Like we've already done a few times already in this space, identify the triggers. What is it that's making me feel this way? Is it this person? Is it this funder that every time I'm in the room with them, I just get the heebie-jeebies, right? Is it that I'm overwhelmed with this grant and this deadline? Is it something else that's making me uncomfortable? And really write this stuff down. Get really clear on what the details are. So then what can we do to regulate? Meditation or mindfulness, right? The mindfulness is just being able to talk about it out loud. The mindfulness is writing it down and being able to say, this is the feeling, this is the experience. Another way that I practice the mindfulness is talking to myself about it. So I take my dog on a walk every day. And when I know that my emotional stuff is really coming up, or I'm having conflict and bad, unclear communication with folks, I pull out my phone, I have my headphones in, and I start recording myself and what I'm feeling. And then maybe a day later or a week later, I will listen to my own conversation with myself to be mindful of not only the words that are coming out of my mouth, but what's the tone? How am I talking about the situation? And how can I really hear it for myself and be clear about how I'm feeling? And then straight up meditation practices are wonderful, right? To sit in silence or even to do a guided meditation. Lots of free resources on YouTube, lots of apps that you can download to just get into the practice of cooling down your body, cooling down your mind, and getting into your body and regulating it. Talking through emotions, right? Talk with yourself about it. I love a good happy hour. Who was at happy hour yesterday? You saw me walking around with my martini, right? Like, schedule those opportunities with your peers, with your colleagues, with your friends, and talk about it. Also, huge fan of therapy, huge fan of having a coach. Have that space to really talk through the things that need to be spoken out loud, right? Give voice to what's going on with the self. Journaling, do it every morning. Get it down on paper. How am I feeling? I felt like I had a weird communication dialogue yesterday, and I went to bed thinking about it, and then I woke up thinking about it, and then I went to my journal and I got really honest about it. And now I know how I'm going to respond about it today, right? It's that mindfulness. It's that practice of, okay, how am I feeling? Notice when you need breaks, right? Sometimes our ability to clearly communicate comes on the other side of taking that pause, taking that breath. Right? Sometimes we're not ready to say the thing that we have to say. We're not ready to go into the meeting. We're not ready to elevate the big concern. So take breaks when you need to prepare yourself. Get good sleep, right? Do we communicate on 3 hours sleep? Do we communicate well on 3 hours sleep? Anyone? Bueller? No, right? Sleep well. Sleep well. It changes the way you communicate with yourself and with others. Same thing with hydrating. Same thing with eating well. Right? You ever come back, like if you're in the middle of a busy day and you find like 10 minutes to eat, and this is my own projection, I'm just like inhaling pasta, and then, I get back to my desk, I'm like, I can't talk to a single person. Like, I'm completely carb loaded right now, so be mindful of what you're eating during the day. That's going to impact the way you communicate. Okay, cool. Step 2, get honest about those triggers. What are my unmet communication needs in the workplace? Right? If you know that you're being activated by too many deadlines, or you're activated by talking to a certain funder, or the way that things are happening in meetings is really challenging and it's really getting to you, how do you get those needs met? How do you say to a peer, a colleague, a supervisor, hey, I'm doing the work. I know that when I'm in this meeting or when I'm in this situation, I feel this way. How do I know I feel this way? Because I react this way. My behavior changes and I don't like it. And I think it's because I'm not getting this need met. I don't have enough buffer time. I need more support when I talk to this funder. I need more resources. I need whatever, fill in the blank, right? So rather than blaming, like, oh, it's all this person's fault, it's, yeah, I'm figuring out what's going on with me, and the missing piece is X, Y, and Z, and I know it's going to change the way I communicate if I can have that resource, if I can have that support. Another question to ask too is, who do I feel activated by, and why? And then how, we're going to get to this in a moment, how do we start to solve and heal some of those tensions that we have with folks so that we can get away from these communication triggers and get what we need to feel more confident in these conversations with folks. And here is the tools. So if some of the issue with communication is that it's certain people, right? Certain people with certain styles that are triggering your not kind or unclear communication, you got to be ready to rumble, right? You can't avoid, sorry, Annie, you can't avoid it. You got to go in, right? You got to go in. And again, you have to do the pausing and the meditating and the good sleeping and the good eating and the getting grounded. And then develop these rumble skills so that you stay engaged in these hard conversations, right? This is what Brene was getting at. The world is complex. It's impacting our work. We need environments and cultures that are more courageous. And we only get there if we start to talk about what's not working. So I love this tool. And if y'all have access to, I think it's a Google Drive that has all the slide decks, I have all of these links and I have the downloads in there as well. So you can print them out, put them on your desk. So I already modeled the first one for you. The story I make up is, I can't tell you how many times I've had tension and unclear communication with somebody on a team, across a team, and I'm making up this whole story. Well, she's this, and she's that, and she's from this part of the neighborhood. You know, I'm just going. And then I schedule the meeting. I pause. I drink my water. I don't eat pasta. I make sure I get good sleep. And the first thing I do, I say, hey, you know, this is the story I'm making up about you. I think you're a micromanager. I think you don't like me. I think X, Y, and Z. I know it's not true, but I just want to be honest about how I feel. What story do you make up about me? And it's actually always laughable. Like I always get to a place with the other person that we're like cracking up, like that's not true. Okay, so then the next step is, how do we solve this? How do we stay curious about what's actually going on? How do we stay curious about your workload or what you're bringing to the space that's making you feel like you're in the pressure cooker, right? Other things you can ask is just to get more information. What are you really dealing with right now? What can you be curious about? How can you ask more questions to help yourself really understand where the person is at? And I love this second to last one is, so what's your passion around this? Right? Because sometimes the challenge in communication, especially when people are really fiery, is that they're just really passionate and they need the work to get done. So how do we meet folks there and understand their passion? I'm going to pause. Questions about this tool? Yeah. Totally. My first question for you, and for anyone who can relate to this, and thank you for lifting that, is there a single ally that you can lean into? Or is every single person around you not approachable?
The allies that we had in that situation were all peers. We did not have an ally in a situation of leadership.
In a situation like that, to get here, right, to be able to rumble, I'm thinking strength in numbers, right? How do you get folks together to have this conversation, to get some data information about the collective feeling, right? So the reason I love the feelings wheel is because obviously you can use it on an individual level, but I also like using it with teams. I like being able to come to groups and say, what's the collective feeling? What's the culture of feeling here, right? So getting a collective understanding of how we all feel, how we're all perceiving this, and then working together to have a conversation upwards. This is why I bring this conversation up in my well-being work, right? Because we can see how communication shakes us up, like shakes us to the core. I'm a fighter, and I'm always in the mindset of How do I keep going? How do I keep going? How do I keep going? But sometimes if we're in these communication situations that are feeling like the pressure cooker has already imploded and there's like some real fear here, sometimes the best way to communicate, and I'm going to keep bringing up Aaron Jones, is to back off. Back off, back up, get yourself what you need to really care for yourself, for your heart, and start to make more informed decisions from kind of like that 30,000 view approach of like, if this is really unhealthy in ways that I can't get my point across and I'm worried about how this is going to impact my livelihood, and I really don't see any possible way to communicate individually, I don't see any possible way to communicate as a collective, then how do I get out? How do I work away? How do I stay safe, right? How do I protect myself? And continue to build allyship, continue to build the support that you need to create the bubble, right? I'm always, I'm a big fan of John Powell over at Berkeley. He talks a lot about the idea of bridging. And some bridges are easy to build, right? With the people that we like, with people that have shared identities, with people who have shared goals. Those bridges are great. They're beautiful. They got rainbows on them, right? You can run back and forth. Then we have something called long bridges, lifetime bridges, bridges that are made of like floss, right? You don't know if you feel safe crossing them. I'm a believer that we still have to build the long bridge, always. We still have to build the long bridges with the people who don't get us, with the people who aren't like us, with the people whose communication styles are like yuck, right? But it doesn't mean that it has to happen today. And it sometimes means that the way to build the long bridge is to actually take a break from the long bridge and focus on your small bridges, right? Focus on the small bridges, focus on the allyship, focus on getting people together that can help you see the opportunity for a long bridge, even though it could take months, years. It could mean leaving a space, coming back to a space when you're ready. Okay? So coming back to rumbling, we have to be able to engage in a hard conversation when it feels safe enough, right? When it feels appropriate. And in those conversations for clear communication, we also have to be willing to give and receive feedback. Like I said, when I showed that list of the workplace triggers, I know all of y'all were like, I know all these people that make me feel that way. But also, like, what am I doing? What are the things and the behaviors that I'm doing that are also contributing to the mess of this communication? And so again, a wonderful tool from Brene is asking yourself, am I ready to give this feedback? Am I ready to really have this conversation? Firstly, can I sit down and be honest and get rumbled up, right? But then also, can I do this? Can I share how I'm feeling and what I'm asking for? And can I be open for folks to ask me to change, right? So here are some of the conversation starters, or boxes you should check, I should say. So are you ready to sit next to this person rather than across from them? That's a very different, like that's a big distinction. Am I ready to call them into a Zoom room and give them hell about how they're making my life hell? Or am I actually, if it's appropriate, right, if you're in the same city, am I willing to go and have dinner with them? Am I willing to sit next to them at a coffee shop and make eye contact with them, right? It's really hard to hate people up close. I say that all the time. It's so hard to hate people up close. So can you get close to a person? Are you willing to put the problem in front of us rather than in between us, right? So again, can I sit next to you and can we look at the problem and untangle it together rather than me continuing to put your character in the problem or saying that your character is the problem? Are you ready to listen? Are you ready to ask questions? Are you ready to accept that you might not fully understand the issue? I can't tell you how many times, just on my own end, issues of communication were clear or became clear because I finally realized that I didn't know all the pieces of the puzzle. Here I am thinking 2 + 2 = 4. It's A and B and then C. And someone's like, oh, but there's D, E, F, G. and HIJKL. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea. Right? So are you willing to get that feedback that you might not know the whole picture? And are you willing to listen and ask questions about the stuff that you don't know? Are you ready to acknowledge what you can do well or what this person does well rather than picking apart their mistakes? Right? Because usually the issues of communication is caught up in what's not working. But before you go into those conversations, can you say to this person, I love the way you do this. And you're an expert when you do that. And when you do this for our team, or when you hold space for the team, it's awesome and it's amazing. And this is where I'm struggling though, right? You're great, and this is what I would love to talk about. This is the feedback I want to offer you. Can you recognize this person's strengths and how you can use them to address the challenges, right? So I'm coming back to some of the stories we shared about how we get activated or why we get activated. It's because we're passionate, right? So how do you ask people to use that passion to help to solve this challenge? Can you hold this person accountable, and can you also hold yourself accountable without blaming or shaming, right? It's not easy. It's not easy, but can you come from this place of, again, taking their character out of the situation and just focusing on the issue and recognizing that the way that they're behaving is a result of so many complexities. It's a result of their stress at work. It might be the result of their stress at home. It might be a result of the way that they were raised, right? So can you pull the blame and shame out of that? Can you own your part? Can you go into a meeting and already have a list of things that says, this is where I was wrong. These are my nasty habits. These are my tendencies. This is where I made a mistake. Can you genuinely thank someone for their efforts rather than criticizing them? Can you talk about resolution through the lens of growth and opportunity? Can you model the vulnerability, right? Bringing it back to Erin Jones. Can you be really honest about how you're feeling about the stuff? And can you also be aware of power dynamics, implicit bias, and stereotypes? So I love that you brought up this example, right? Because I think a lot of us, maybe for folks that are middle managers, it's really hard to have this conversation upwards. But for folks that are a little bit higher on the hierarchy, you've got a huge responsibility here. I tell folks all the time when I do a communications training that if you don't have any, if you're a supervisor, if you're a boss, if you're leading a team and you're not getting feedback, it's not because you're great necessarily. It's not because no one's got anything to say. You're so perfect, we've got nothing to say. It's because people might be fearful. People might be freaked out at the idea of giving you feedback. People might not know what to say. There's this quote that I love. I'm sad that I didn't write it down because it's so perfect for this moment. But the true testament to your leadership isn't what people say to you face to face, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's about what comes up in the meetings that you're not in, right? So think about that if you're a supervisor. What are the things that you want folks to be saying about you when you're not in the room? And it can't always be perfect. But are you setting up the type of culture and the type of environment and type of lines of communication where if someone does have an issue or a qualm or something they want to bring up, they know they can come to you rather than it existing in these other spaces? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the system, right? We talked about the self. We talked about the social piece, right? Talking to another person. And then now we're taking it a bigger step forward or going to the next level and challenging the overall system that creates this pressure cooker that allows some of this bad communication, unclear communication to fester. And so here are a couple powerful questions that you can ask about your organization's culture and norms. When was the last time we reviewed these systems and their impact on our work? And I like to bring these conversations up in regular meetings, right? So when I say challenge the system, I'm not saying like knock on HR's door and say like, I got an issue with the system, right? It's just constantly, or I should say consistently, being really curious about the systems that get us hung up. When I came into a new organization, I was feeling the stress individually of not great communication. I noticed how it was creating tension between me and colleagues on different teams. And so when we were in meetings where I felt that tension and where I felt that stress, I would just pause and I say, does it make sense to use this spreadsheet? And I can't tell you how many times folks are like, oh, maybe not, actually. Does this system make sense? Does this process make sense? Also ask folks, do you like this system? Do you like this process? When was the last time we reviewed the system and how it impacts our team? And I feel like we miss opportunities to talk about that or to bring that up because we're in these complex, very fast-moving environments, right? We're bringing on new people. Maybe the way we're reaching people is changing, or maybe there's some new legislation and now we've got to pivot and do something different. You got to pause and say, okay, but does the system we have, does the process we have, does the framework we have make sense for the way things are changing? And you just have to ask that consistently. Another question to ask is, how frequently do we update this system to keep up with the rapidly changing times? Does it make sense to keep doing it this way? Some more questions. What's the resistance to changing things? If this system doesn't work, if this tool doesn't work, here's a great example, right? Does it make sense for us to meet every week for an hour? Does it? No? Okay. Should we change it? Oh, you don't want to change it? Well, what's up? What's the resistance to change? Oh, I'm anxious that I'm not going to get the information from you that I need if we don't meet every week. Well, we can meet every week, but do we have to meet for an hour? Can we bring it to a half an hour? Can we meet every other week? Is there stuff that we can communicate via email? I understand that your communication trigger might be that you're worried about unresponsiveness, but does the system we have up make you feel secure in your responsiveness, but is it also causing more stress because it doesn't make sense for other people, right? So just being open to other people's resistance to changing, and also what is your resistance to changing. I'm working with a client right now, and she's got a series of consultants helping her build her infrastructure for a hub that she's building. And I hate admitting this, I love like multiple spreadsheets or multiple documents that represent different things, right? This one's for this one and that one's for that. And so I'm working with this new consultant and she's like, so we should just have all of these in one document with different tabs. And I'm like, how dare you? But I could speak in the moment to my resistance to changing that. I'm like, yeah, I really like different things in different places. If it makes sense for the client to have everything in one place, that's great. But I'm just going to be honest, I'm resistant to that. And it might take me a minute to get the hang of that. Right? So that's what I mean. What is the resistance to change and how can you be really honest, again, with the feelings that it brings up so that it doesn't become a communication issue? I don't want this consultant to be going into the documents being like, Loretta hasn't done a damn thing, right? We don't get there because I can say up front, oh, I'm resistant to this. I'm going to get there, but I'm feeling a type of way about it. Another question to ask is, how do we measure the success of communicating across teams? And I think that comes back to the prompt that we started with. What does clear communication feel like? And if you're not feeling that way across teams, then how do you start talking with teams about what you want it to feel like for them? Hey, this is how it's feeling for me. How's it feeling for you? I would like it to feel exuberant. I would like it to feel easy. So how do we measure success of feeling that way? What needs to change? Maybe it's less meetings, right? Maybe it's shared documents. And I always love this question. What is the cost of continuing to operate in this way? Right? Are we going to keep wearing people down? Are we going to keep spinning around the drain? Are we going to keep spinning our wheels? What is the consequence if we don't change the way we communicate? And I'm going to leave you with this very fun infographic. Ultimately, the thing that I like to drive home with this conversation is communication issues are always among us, right? It happens every single day with people we like, people we don't like. It's just a natural part of the human experience. Again, especially in the nature of the work we do, especially in these cultures that we're operating in. And it really does start with the self. This is so cliche, but be the change you want to see in the world, right? Be the change you want to see in the organization. Model the type of communication that you really want for yourself. Model that feeling of clear communication that you really want for yourself. And it has to start with the self, right? We can be in meetings and someone can say like, I want better communication. I want us to communicate better. And everyone's like, yeah, me too, right? But as soon as someone says, well, I want you all to change individually as a way to have better communication, we kind of second guess ourselves, right? And then when someone says, hey, I want you to model that change, I want you to be the leader that models that change, everyone exits the room. So my encouragement for you today is stay in the room, right? Keep your hand raised. I want change. I'm willing to work on myself as a result of the bigger change. I'm willing to change so that we all change. And I'm willing to model it. I'm willing to be a leader in clear, kind communication. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.